Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. It is Thursday by my count, and I am joined by Linda Tran. Nice to see you, Linda.
I'm going to ask you every single week, but did you miss me, Robby? Because I missed you.
Of course I missed you.
And
I look forward to Thursday.
As usual.
Yeah, we're not, I don't think we're...
I mean, you know, spring colors.
Yeah,
like,
it's not...
It's time.
It's not hurting anyone's eyes, hopefully.
What's on your radar, Robby?
Happy to share with you. Well, the odds of a government shutdown just got a lot higher as Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer declared his caucus is not willing to support the continuing resolution approved by the House to fund the government for another 6 months. Let's watch.
Funding the government should be a bipartisan effort, but Republicans chose a partisan path, drafting their continuing resolution without any input from congressional Democrats. Because of that, Republicans do not have the votes in the Senate to invoke cloture on the House CR. Our caucus is unified on a clean April 11th CR that will keep the government open and give Congress time to negotiate bipartisan legislation that can pass.
In other words, Shutdown Schumer is only willing to support a 30-day extension of current government spending levels. Now that's a problem because what the House passed was a 6-month extension. And after passing it, they all left town. So it's very unlikely that the House is going to come back to Washington in the next 48 hours in order to play ball with Chuck Schumer and sign off on the plan that he likes before the funding deadline, which is 12:01 a.m. Saturday night or morning. So unless Schumer is bluffing, the government is going to shut down. To which I say, okay, fine. I mean, look, not really. Obviously, a sudden, abrupt, unplanned shutdown of the federal government is less than ideal. It hurts the economy, it creates inefficiencies, it puts some vital services on hold, at least makes it more difficult for citizens to take advantage of these vital services. And importantly, it doesn't even end up saving money. I think by some estimations it costs money. What typically happens is the government employees who are furloughed while the government shuts down, they end up receiving back pay whenever the funding package is eventually agreed to. Now, I want smaller government, much smaller government. This is not the right way to do it. Even so, one has to sort of marvel at the irony. Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency have been ruthlessly rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse and keeping President Trump up to date on all sorts of unpopular foreign aid programs that they think he should cut. In response, Democrats have railed at Musk and Trump for cutting government in non-democratic fashion. They say that Elon and Trump have no right to abolish whole departments and engage in mass firing of federal employees and cancellations of various funding schemes. They don't even think Trump should be able to email the federal workforce, to say nothing of the fury over the name 5 things you did today, this week email. The Democratic Party's argument against all of this, of course, is that it's undemocratic and chaotic to reduce the size and scope of the federal government in this matter. And yet, the Democratic Party is willing to let the entire government shut down if they don't get their way, even though they don't control any branches of government. The only way they can do this, obviously, is through the filibuster, which is hardly a cornerstone of democracy. It actually allows the minority party to thwart the will of the majority. Now, again, to be clear, I don't have any problem with that, but it's very contrary to every message we've heard from Democrats since Trump was elected, and since it became clear that he was actually going to take advantage of his mandate and, do things. The day-to-day operations of the federal government are very much under threat right now. It's not Elon Musk who's about to bring it all crashing down. It's Chuck Schumer. So, we're going to do it. We're stopping, we're derailing the government, which I was, assured by Democrats was just this evil project of Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And now Chuck Schumer is willing to do it because that's what's going to happen. They're not all going to come back to Washington to vote on a new package when Chuck Schumer and Democrats are going to be the ones who are blamed for this shutdown, as they all are willing to do. So I don't understand the strategy whatsoever. What is their strategy?
Well, we shall see. I don't think any of us know exactly what's going to happen in the next few days here, but let's be clear about what's happening. So yes, Chuck Schumer and the Democratic Party, members of Congress, are caught between that metaphorical rock and a hard place. And why is that? On the one hand, you have activists and Democratic Party stalwarts who are clearly very upset that they haven't seen vociferous fighting from their elected leaders in Congress, and it's starting to play out here. But on the other hand, members of Congress on the Democratic side really do care about government. I mean, to your point earlier about the long-standing messaging about keeping government going and essential services, what they're concerned about is pretty legitimate. On the House side of things, what they passed was a $13 billion cut to really, really serious programs, including programs that support farmers, programs that support veterans, programs that support education, for example, that people really, really rely on in this country. And at the same time, increasing your personal favorite, Robby, $6 billion more for defense spending. So Senator Schumer and his cadre of leaders really have to make a stand against what these are incredibly value conflicted issues that they're going to have to push back against.
Yeah, I personally agree with Thomas Massie, who voted against the entire thing because it just maintains federal spending at the Biden levels, which I thought we elected Republicans to fix that problem. I agree with Senator Rand Paul, who we interviewed on Rising today. It was a great interview. People should go back and watch it if they missed it, who said that it's unthinkable that we, the Republicans who now control the Congress and have the presidency, would continue doing funding at the same level as Democrats, and he supported a rescissions package that actually is not subject to the filibuster. Donald Trump could basically send this spending back to Congress, and then they could do, on a simple majority basis, rescissions to cancel out some of it. Maybe they could still do that. I hope it takes place. But in the meantime, I agree with the small number of Republicans who actually want to enact the America First MAGA agenda that Trump ran on. At the same time, it's just weird to see Democrats are going to end up accomplishing temporarily the same thing. Because, of course, what's ultimately going to happen has happened every other time the government shuts down. They restore back pay to all the federal workers who didn't have to work in that time period. So it doesn't end up saving any money. I'm just amazed that they're actually willing to go there. Maybe not. Maybe they'll blink at the last moment, and we will have the House continuing resolution agreed to by the Senate. I don't know what else could possibly happen. Or the federal government will shut down for some number of days. I think that's probably rising in likelihood.
Or it could be that they make this push for this 30-day extension, it fails, and they have the opportunity to say that they at least fought for it. I do think it's really a difficult position, even just from an optics position, for Senator Schumer, for Democrats writ large, to say, yeah, I'm okay with shutting everything down and only doing a little piece of government, which, by the way, would then put the power into the hands of Donald Trump and his leadership team to decide what exactly is quote unquote essential. I was one of those essential employees, and let me tell you, running government is hard enough at full staff, much less with nobody sitting in the chairs.
Yeah, that's a good point. Donald Trump might be about to get exactly what him and Elon want in terms of shutting down vast swaths of the government. Next up on Rising, the chemical giant attempting to gag cancer victims. We'll tell you about that. Stay tuned. The Cancer Gag Act could become federal law. Now, the 2018 legislation introduced in Idaho, Iowa, and Missouri shields chemical makers from failure to warn lawsuits if they comply with the EPA's labeling standards.
According to recent reporting from The Lever, Bayer, the maker of weed killer Roundup, is lobbying Congress to ban cancer victims from suing the company over not properly disclosing the herbicide's alleged health risks. Since 2018, Bayer has shelled out a whopping $10.9 billion to settle over 167,000 claims linking Roundup to lymphoma. The company denies it. While the World Health Organization declared the pesticide carcinogenic, U.S. regulators have not reached a consensus.
Joining us now to elaborate on her reporting is Veronica Riccobene, a former Rising producer, now reporter for The Lever. Welcome so much, Ronnie. Nice to see you again. My all-star former producer on the show. It's great to have you back with us.
It was wonderful to be back in the Rising studio on the other side of things. Thank you for having me.
Always lovely to talk to you and catch up with you. Tell us about this law and the effect it's likely to have.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wish we were talking maybe under happier news, but basically Bayer, which bought Monsanto, the creator of Roundup in 2018, since it bought the company, has been really on the hook for billions of dollars of these lymphoma-related lawsuits that claim that Bayer, then Monsanto, has known that its pesticide, its herbicide Roundup, the key ingredient which glyphosate has been linked to lymphoma, that they've known that there are health risks associated with their product, but they have intentionally concealed them from customers. That is what these lawsuits, these failure to warn lawsuits allege. Now, as you mentioned in the intro, the science on Roundup and glyphosate isn't 1,000%. Several studies in the last 10 years have shown a pretty clear link between exposure to the pesticide and lymphoma. However, the Environmental Protection Administration under Trump originally issued a ruling that said the herbicide did not cause cancer. There was no legal link. And basically, Bayer is saying because of this ruling, we think there should be legislation saying that these failure to warn lawsuits have no legal standing because the EPA said that glyphosate doesn't cause cancer, and thus basically you can't sue us. And these bills, they haven't passed in state legislatures, but they have been introduced. Language was explicitly written by Bayer, Monsanto, and then introduced by lawmakers, as well, and some language in federal legislation as well. That would basically give them a get out of jail free card.
Veronica, as you well know, there are some interesting dynamics in this administration, and one of them happens to be that the new health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has been quite vocal in his opposition and his concern about that chemical glyphosate that you're talking about here. What do you think the implications are here, and should we expect him to step forward? Does he have a role to play in this discussion?
We're definitely waiting with bated breath to see what Robert F. Kennedy has to say. As an environmental lawyer, he was a practicing attorney for many decades before entering politics. He represented clients suing Bayer specifically due to their cancer, which they say was caused by pesticide use. A historic nearly $300 million award was given to one of Mr. Kennedy's clients in 2018. So he hasn't said anything since foraying into politics and since aligning himself with the administration specifically on glyphosate. But as I mentioned, the EPA ruling per se, it's not a legal ruling, but it's an administrative and executive one. Given by the agency is kind of up in the air right now. They issued it under Trump, and then Biden rescinded it, and it's still under investigation. So all that to be said, it looks like Kennedy could have a real role in what the government's official stance on glyphosate is, and thus whether this legislation stands up.
Can you tell us more about the EPA's decision making here, how they reach a conclusion like that this product is safe? Because I could just to play devil's advocate, I could understand someone on the other side saying, well, if government regulators say this product is safe, shouldn't that take off the table what they would probably consider frivolous lawsuits? I take it you don't consider those lawsuits frivolous at all, and maybe they're not. But what is the the EPA's rationale?
It's complicated. Like all things in science, there are studies that show a much stronger link between glyphosate and cancer than other studies. I think it's complicated when it comes to a company that brings in so much revenue. I think regulators know that their decisions have a major play in the industry, and unfortunately, as much as the science is the biggest role, ultimately politics do play into it, which is why I think there is something to be said for Robert F. Kennedy's role in the administration, actually making a difference in the EPA's ruling on glyphosate. Government regulators are independent bureaucrats. They are not elected. So really, it shouldn't matter theoretically who is president or who is administrator of the EPA or of the Health and Human Services Department. But unfortunately, that's just not the reality.
And a lot of times we talk about policy here on the show, and it doesn't necessarily have quite this direct of an impact on consumers. What would you say, Veronica, what role do consumers have to play in this discussion at this juncture, or do they?
Consumers, as always, are encouraged to I think they should do their own research and in general, make their own informed decisions. When it comes to specifically legislation like this, it's open for public comment. Look up, and if you notice your state being read at the top of this, at the top of the intro, and you have something to say, whether you're in support of the legislation or against it, certainly encourage consumers to to speak to their government officials and to speak to their lawmakers. Ultimately, it's hard because your power as a consumer comes with your ability to choose who you buy from. But in an ever consolidating world where industries are getting smaller, getting bigger with smaller, with less companies, your choices are limited. So speak to your congressman is my advice.
Right, and you know, to be clear here, this law is preventing people from suing. It's not to say that every claim made against this product or this company is going to be immediately validated. It's just to take away your ability to even, you know, have your case made in a court. So I think that's going to be persuasive for many people, and you know, many people not trusting exactly what, you know, the government always says about people's health without, as you said, looking into the matter themselves or consulting alternative perspectives. Veronica Riccobene, thank you so much for bringing this story to our attention and for returning to Rising, albeit sadly only briefly.
It's wonderful to be back. Thank you so much for having me.
Up next, Gavin Newsom, Steve Bannon, breaking bread. I did not have that on my bingo card. We'll tell you about it. Stay tuned. Who would have thought that someone like California Governor Gavin Newsom would find common ground with MAGA world megastar Steve Bannon?
Bannon joined Governor Newsom's podcast Wednesday. The two discussed Trump, Elon Musk, the economy, and more.
Bannon tried swinging Newsom to his way of viewing things economically and even criticized some Republicans. Let's watch.
The purpose I want to do this is I want to convert you to be a tariff guy also. This is part of the process to unwind you from being a globalist to make you a populist nationalist. It's a long journey. It's a long journey. It's a long journey, but I think you'll get there.
This is part of the deprogramming, is it? I appreciate.
I'm pretty adamant about that. You shouldn't, the upper bracket shouldn't get it, and even some of the corporations shouldn't get it if they're just going to do stock buybacks. But additional tax cuts should go as President Trump promised: no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and particularly no tax on Social Security.
Yeah, but I mean, his current proposal doesn't add up then in that respect. Blows the deficit and continues those corporate tax cuts and continues the tax cuts to the wealthiest. So it runs. And I'm not.
I think what we're, not to be argumentative.
No, appreciate it.
We want to have an open dialogue. I think when you look at Besson, and what Besson's trying to do is take the deficit from 6.5% of GDP down to 3.5% of GDP. So this not this out of control explosion of $2 trillion in deficits, which we as Republicans are about to sign off on today. Just so your audience understands, this CR today, the House will approve the Biden-Kamala Harris spending for this year.
Locking it in.
Bannon took some shots at Silicon Valley's tech titans and called on Governor Newsom to step up. Let's listen.
If we're ever to get control of the oligarchs, you as governor and as, quite frankly, the leader of that wing of the party have got to work with us to say, hey, this can't go on any longer.
We may share some commonality in terms of concern about what he's doing. But that said, let me just
hold it. No, hang on. Concern. You guys you loved all the oligarchs, and particularly Elon, until they flipped. And remember, all the rest of these oligarchs were all progressive Democrats until 11 p.m.
I don't know, they're progressive. I refer to him as libertarian, and I know these guys intimately, known him for decades. And look, he wants to be the first trillionaire in the world. I mean, what's his end game here?
Well, you know it. You guys, you created him a governor. I mean, you
By
guys.
the way, in many respects, California did. It was our regulatory process and our subsidies to create this market. You're 100% right. I think you're right about that.
He left Canada to come to California. That was his. He's South Africa.
And then a big check from the federal government, from everybody watching, that backed his play early on when he was in deep need. He paid it back relatively quickly, but he's been the beneficiary of billions and billions and billions of dollars continues of subsidies.
Lastly, Bannon praised a couple of Democrats.
You know, two of the three best economic populists in the Democratic Party, who I think are kind of on an island. One of the best is Ro Khanna. Ro's economic patriotism, which we always kid him as just ripping off Navarre and my economic nationalism, is he's an economic populist. So is Fetterman. Fetterman just announced, we're here today during the CR. Fetterman just announced he would support the CR if it came in as Fetterman's a populist. And then Sherrod Brown. Sherrod Brown, I think, has been an economic populist for a long time. So there are very strong voices in the Democratic Party.
Claremont Institute Vice President Andrew Beck wrote on X, "You all know my warnings about Newsom. I dislike this show because it's a net gain for him. But I do like this Bannon appearance because it mainstreams and humanizes Steve, which I think is long overdue. Newsom having him as a guest before many conservatives should make you think."
Executive editor of Commentary magazine, Abe Greenwald, wrote, "Newsom's desperation is bottomless. Even I blew off Bannon when he wanted me on his pod." Former Congressman Adam Kinzinger had something to say.
I see that Gavin Newsom has decided to invite Steve Bannon on his podcast, and they're going to have just a wonderful conversation. Bannon is the author of this chaos we're seeing right now. Bannon is the one that says you need to flood the zone with shit. Bannon is the one that has basically authored where we are and what Donald Trump wants. And because Gavin Newsom wants to run for president and thinks he's going to be this healer, he brings on this nationalist. Many of us on the right sacrificed our careers taking these people on, and Newsom's trying to make a career with them. This is insane.
I think it is good when people who disagree have interesting conversations. That's the whole premise of the show, Rising. So that's fine with me. I thought it was an interesting and insightful conversation. They do have areas of commonality because for as much as Steve Bannon is portrayed as the most far-right and evil figure on earth, the truth is that his economic policies in many ways align with the left. Now, I disagree with his economic policies. I disagree with him on tariffs. I disagree with his desire to regulate Elon Musk and the broligarchs more aggressively, but that's standard issue Democratic stuff. So it's not surprising to me that they can get along because they share the project of reducing the ability for the tech sector to innovate and be unregulated. And you can be in favor of that. And if you are, you probably are a Democrat, but Steve Bannon also agrees with that. So it's actually not that surprising. Sometimes people who are, the way the media goes out, so far right. So like there are areas of overlap between right and left that are like, are they extreme? What does that word even mean anymore?
Robby, my party is a big tent party.
Yeah.
And what that means is that there are many factions that are constantly disagreeing with each other. And let me tell you, after 25 some odd years dealing with this dynamic, I'm not surprised at all to see people levying criticisms against Governor Newsom. But I also know Gavin Newsom, and no one is telling him what to do. No one is deciding for him what he thinks. And if from a tactical standpoint, if you want to have a popular podcast, have some relevant voices. Mm-hmm. And whatever you think of Steve Bannon, you can say he's not a relevant voice. As you just mentioned, he's the architect of many of the different things that we're seeing play out in this administration and has insights into how, say, President Donald Trump thinks. So of course it makes sense that he's having him on. And what we're seeing is that people are tuning in. They're really interested. Millions and millions of views and listens so far just in 2 rounds of this podcast.
Yeah, I don't know what Gavin Newsom is trying to accomplish necessarily with this, but if it's to make me slightly more favorably inclined toward him, I guess it's working. We're seeing a more, it's nice just to hear people. This is the strength of the podcast environment. Like, it's unscripted, it goes on forever. You can't just cling to your abstract, simple talking points that have never confronted a real person's criticism before in the format, because it goes on and on and on, and you actually have to speak from the heart, and you actually have to draw on whatever your actual views or ideas or base of knowledge is or your personality, and it's coming through a little bit. I very much disagree with Gavin Newsom. I very much think his overseeing of California has been disastrous. I think his COVID policies were insane. Now, it may be the case that he is actually the least insane person grappling with some even more out there progressive officials at various levels who would want to drive California even more off a cliff than he did. So maybe he'll be able to share more of that, areas where he can find common ground with the right. Now, again, I hope they don't find common ground on being more pro-tariffs or anything like that. So I hope. I would actually want Gavin Newsom, if Gavin Newsom is against tariffs, which I guess he is, to convince Bannon to come along that way.
Governor Newsom would tell you at various points either he was governor of the 5th largest economy in the world or the 4th largest economy in the world. So I'm quite certain that he has strong opinions about tariffs and their impact on industry and obviously on consumers themselves. Look, I very much believe that we need to be talking to each other more. It's why I'm sitting next to you on a weekly basis, Robby. The way that we get to common ground and consensus and make progress on issues that really impact people's lives is by having a conversation about it, not by turning our backs on each other.
All right, up next, is the Trump resistance getting a little old? I think it is. We'll discuss. Stay tuned. The Democratic anti-Trump resistance is old. That's the subject of Semafor journalist David Weigel's latest piece. In with the old, the anti-Trump resistance comes of age. Congressman Al Green and Senator Bernie Sanders have become faces of the resistance with defiant cane-waving stunts and flashy protests.
As Weigel points out, quote, the second Trump resistance has proven more challenging for Democrats than the first, when most of their voters supported their ad hoc fight back. Polling has found widespread dissatisfaction with their leaders and confusion about what they're doing to stop Trump. Now, will Senator Chuck Schumer join Green and Bernie Sanders and lead the charge to shut down the government? Joining us further to discuss this is the legendary David Weigel, a politics reporter for Semafor. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks for bringing me on.
Dave, lots of red flags everywhere for my party. Tell us how we got here in the first place, and what does that say about what we need to do right this second to make a shift?
In this moment, Democrats, like I said, that graph, thanks for highlighting that one, are really angry at their party. And I say confused, not in a pretentious, I'm a Beltway insider, they're not way. But it is hard to follow what the Democratic resistance looks like. It has different components. There is a legal component that's doing pretty well. These attorneys general and Democratic law firms suing to stop DOJ or slow it down. And then there's the congressional component, which is really impotent. According to the Constitution, doesn't have the power to slow things down, except as it's doing right now with the CR. It can block spending in the Senate. Before we got on to talk about this, the chatter I was seeing from the liberals I follow and leftists I follow was just fury at Democrats for even considering funding the government. And that's a pretty impossible position for Democrats to be in. So that explains why when they see a Democrat like Al Green or Bernie Sanders taking a stand and not necessarily winning, just explaining and attacking Republicans, that's exciting to them in a way that just grinding down and losing in the Congress is not.
Yeah, it's a very tough position the Democrats find themselves in right now, where they don't really know what the strategy should be for opposing Trump and becoming more popular. And it's really not obvious what the strategy should be because they have different components. There's just not, the level of mass protesting in the streets is not there right now that might, feel like make them feel like they have to do something. You're right that I think certain liberals were happy about, for instance, the Al Green stunt at the address. A lot of other people thought it was, totally ineffective. Even people who don't like Trump, I think, thought it was just kind of, well, what was the point of that? It felt maybe a little insincere or just for show. Do you think they are actually liberals, Democrats, rank and file activists, the various contingents of the Democratic Party, who is excited for the potential of a government shutdown and who is not? Is it just, we got to do something, how dare you go along with this, even if it's going to be not really a short-term or long-term win?
No, it's the last thing you said, that we got to do something. And what do Green and Sanders have in common besides their age? Their age is part of it. They both come from a baby boomer generation that was there for the Vietnam War, was there for the iconic fights of the left that every left-wing group, if I'm not overgeneralizing, evokes when they're fighting something, right? You can see this when the tactics that even environmental groups use are inspired by civil rights groups and immigrant rights groups. And they look to these elders of the movement as exemplars of what should be done to win. They forget that the left got things done in the 60s because they controlled the government. They had LBJ and supermajorities. All the left-wing programs that were successful were from that. But there is this desire from, I'd say it's a meta-narrative among liberals and the left, that when people stand up and resist, they win. And Democrats in Washington are going through not the motions, but going through the normal process of trying to use cumbersome and not very effective, if you're a minority, government tools to negotiate, to get leverage, to lose leverage. That's just not inspiring. Going protesting and saying we're going to burn the whole thing down, that's very inspiring. And Sanders is not saying burn the whole thing down. Sanders is making an electoral argument, if you look at his speeches, saying we need to just organize against Elon Musk and win these next elections and save the country from the billionaires. But that's more exciting than, look, we need to maybe slow this CR down by a few days. And the final point I make on this is it's Republicans are being revolutionary without having to work very hard, because the reason so many supported the CR is because Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Elon Musk made this promise to them, and hey, you're going to vote for spending, but look at Doge. They're not even going to send the checks out. I'm quoting Rich Hudson from North Carolina. These checks are not going to go out. Don't worry about the spending. That's what Democrats in the base see happening on the Republican Party, and they look at their leaders and say, "Hey, those guys are breaking the rules and breaking the law, and they're winning sometimes. Why can't you do that?"
Yeah, we've heard a lot of that sort of criticism from Democrats recently. And if you look at the numbers, you look at the big picture, the suffering that's happening from an economic standpoint at this particular moment, it seems like Democrats have a lot of fodder for criticizing what's happening in this administration. However, we heard the great James Carville recently make a very strong argument that Democrats should in many ways just roll over. What do you think about that, Dave?
Yeah, by rolling over, looking at his column, I know what he's talking about. It's that if Republicans get to run the country and they're associated with everything happening, Democrats will benefit because it's not going to work. And this is basically the theory of Republicans in 2009, 2010. I mean, this is the funny thing in politics is you never win by fighting the last war, but the only thing you have is the last war. So they're invoking what worked for the right in the past with very different principles. The right wants to shrink the government down. It's doing generational projects here by getting rid of the Department of Education and to a lesser extent USAID. The left's projects involve winning big majorities and passing bills in cumbersome ways. So it's really hard to find a model that works for what Democrats want to do. But all this goes back to, I'll make another reference to history here, but in 2017, Democrats were a little more excited by how their party was resisting, because there was a sense, and just go back and read the columns, watch the late night shows, the hosts, look at what won Oscars. There was this sense that there are rules among Democrats, and Trump is going to break these rules, and he's going to have to go at some point. He's going to fire James Comey. That's illegal. He'll have to resign. He's going to be impeached, and Republicans will abandon him, something's going to happen, a deus ex machina, and he's going to go. And they don't think that anymore. And that broke, not just after 2020, but that broke in 2024 with the Supreme Court's ruling on whether Trump could be prosecuted for actions he took as president. When the Supreme Court said no, that was really a shudder that went out across all Democrats, saying, okay, there's actually no way to slow Trump down except for beating him in an election. And they didn't. So they don't have a way to beat him in an election. They have referenda coming up. For example, Wisconsin's Supreme Court race on April 1st that they're going to try to make into choices on Trump. But they don't have some way to just beat him systematically. It has to be done. You have to beat Republicans in elections. And that is just, I wouldn't say less inspiring, but that is more of a slog than they thought they were getting into when Trump first arose in the scene. They really did. If you talk to Democratic activists, they really did think there's something, there are norms, there's a system, and something's going to save us. There's a norm fairy that's going to come in through the window like Tinkerbell, and it's going to save us somehow. And they don't think that. And that really, I think, runs through all of their misery at how to deal with Trump. Even when they win in court, as they've done, as I've been saying a number of times, the administration has already fired people in these agencies, or it will go and appeal and see what it can do, get the injunction lifted, or maybe even break the TRO, because who's gonna enforce it? A temporary restraining order. I want to repeat myself too much, but that's why Democrats are saying who is leading us and who is inspiring us and who can smash this system. And I think one piece of this is Trump could do it. They're not looking for their own Trump, but they're looking for somebody who can inspire people enough to shake this system up the way he did, because they're slowly realizing that minute by minute that there is not just a normal system that you can pull a lever and come back to. Politics can be revolutionary. It's Republicans doing the revolution.
We hear a lot of that saying that politics is downstream of culture. And I think all these problems tie together a little bit in terms of the advanced age of so many in our government in general, this is a Republican problem as well, but especially on the Democratic side, the advanced age of some of the leaders, people who've been in Washington forever, just not being with the times. You know, there's been this massive vibe shift to the right in terms of young people on social media. Elon Musk purchasing X and making it into a more of a right-wing platform has something to do with that. But the kind of, media, there was such a healthy and robust media ecosystem of progressive voices and activism that went hand in hand with Bernie Sanders' rise and from the 2015 to 2020 period. I see so little of that now, and I just want what do the Democrats have in terms of a cultural, like their capture of culture? They used to have such like a monopoly over popular culture that they have totally lost in a short period of time. And it's like, what are the soft persuasion methods to get people more excited for Democratic figures or progressive cultural or political values? Like, all of that has kind of gone away.
Yeah, they don't have one. I would say Saturday Night Live's opening sketches often do get around, and if they're funny enough, can make people laugh who are not even Democrats. But they don't have that ability to even freeze and polarize something, make something infamous, and make something the subject of fun. I see Sanders actually is an important figure in that, because remember, it was Sanders went on Joe Rogan's podcast at, I guess, what is in retrospect the height of liberal cancel mindset. There was a huge backlash from progressive media and from other Democratic candidates that Sanders would go on and platform Joe Rogan. And that is not how Democrats think anymore. A lot of things they do, that's one of my least favorite words in journalism is quietly. Quietly means you didn't have a press conference and say it. But yeah, quietly, Democrats have been realizing we did lose the culture. We need to have a concord with the new culture that has overwhelmed us, and find young people who don't watch traditional news, don't watch SNL, don't watch Stephen Colbert. That's kind of what Sanders still does some of that. That's what Newsom's doing to an extent. And I bring that up because he's getting lambasted by the left for doing it. I've seen a lot of criticism, and I'm not trying to be super generic. I've seen you had Adam Kinzinger, who's part of the kind of left's coalition now. But on Blue Sky, a lot of influential liberals there saying, how dare he do this? There's a way to beat Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk. It's not going on and having a conversation with them. What Newsom's trying to do, and what Sanders was always very good at and still does, is saying, no, if I'm in that space, people will hear me in that space and say, well, at least he can talk to me. And I've heard that from a lot of Democrats who won their elections in November, congressional Democrats, because they, by and large, did better than Kamala Harris. And they think an advantage for them is that, just as some people who have to run every 2 years or 6 years, as people who have their own media strategies, they build up more of a reputation as people who can enter a room and take questions, and they know they're screwed if they can't, because if they can't, $20 million will come in and define them anyway. And so what Newsom's doing, he's not one of the old Democrats that we're talking about, but it's like what Sanders was doing at the height of Democrat cancel mania, of saying, I will go in and talk to anyone. I don't care. I'm not going to say this outlet had a crazy vaccine opinion, or this outlet's too right wing. I'm going to try to make my case, because, as you guys know better than anybody, just in the world of podcasts, if somebody is just interesting and they sound like they're listening to you and they respond, it is hard to exit that conversation and say, I hate that person. No, they tried. And that is what, without changing a ton of their policies, because that's much harder, that's what you've started to see Democrats do, is say, okay, we're going to go on Bill Maher, and people are going to yell at us for going on Bill Maher, but that's fine. Bill Maher's going to say something that offends people about trans people and gender identity. We have to do that, because a lot of our voters that we lost, especially like in Texas, Latino voters, don't agree with us on that. So can we in some way talk to those voters? They've not figured us out. We're having a conversation about something they've not figured out. But that's what's happening. And I think you've noticed over the last couple of weeks, the left that used to have the ability to say, don't go into that room, don't talk to that person, don't take that position, people are not listening to them. People in the Democratic Party are not listening to them. Sanders has the credibility for running for president and being in his final term as a senator and famous. and other Democrats are tipping in that direction. The people lost in all this are those kind of cultural, I would say cultural commanders. I think of the best way to put it, people who were used to having a lot on the culture and are still in this mindset that there's a right way of doing things. There are norms in how the government works. There's a direction by how in which social progress moves, and these guys are going to figure out eventually they're moving in the wrong direction. The other Democrats have said maybe not. Maybe there's not one direction that culture and politics move, and we actually need to get in there and fight in places that are not comfortable. And that's not exactly what Green was doing. But Green was doing that in the norms universe of Congress, saying, yeah, I'm going to get yelled at because I broke the norms of Congress. I'm going to get censured. Who cares? I think that was having talked to him about this, pretty sophisticated, because if Democrats slow down and pay attention, has being censured by the Congress done anything bad for anyone's career in politics? It really hasn't. It did not matter for Marjorie Taylor Greene. Did not matter for Eric Holder. It did not matter for Joe Wilson. They all raised money off it. And some of them are having trouble with this because they love those norms. They're the party of government, the party of the bureaucracy. They want them to be as strong as possible. And a lot of the more innovative ones, young and old, are saying, nope, doesn't work. Sorry, you're trying to rebuild a castle out of sand after the tides rolled in. Like, what are you doing anymore? You have to move on. That is the emerging thinking in the party, and that's been actually kind of exciting to watch, because there's a world where they won the 2024 election. I don't think they're reinvestigating how they talk to people in the same way.
Yeah, I agree very strongly with that. Linda and I were just talking a minute ago about Gavin Newsom's very interesting podcast, and it works. It does. Like, even I think he seems, even though I dislike his policies and his governance, it's making him seem a bit more relatable. Not everyone can succeed in that kind of environment where you just talk for a long period of time, just to someone else, someone you don't agree with, and come off well. Kamala Harris, I'm not sure, could succeed in that environment, or prove that she could succeed in that environment. Maybe she could in some future. Gavin Newsom actually kind of is demonstrating he can succeed that way, so it's very interesting. Got to leave it there. Dave Weigel, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
It was great, guys. Thanks for letting me expound on it, because it's a big topic. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Yep.
Next up, your glass of wine may have just gotten a lot more expensive. That's bad news for this guy. The latest on Trump's tariff war. The global trade war is heating up. Canada and the EU said they were hitting the U.S. with fresh new tariffs.
This was in response to Trump's increased tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. Reporters asked Trump earlier Wednesday how he'd respond if the EU and Canada made this move. And in typical Trump fashion, here he is.
If you put more tariffs on the EU, will you respond to their retaliation?
Of course I'm going to respond.
You will retaliate.
The problem is our country didn't respond. Look, the EU was set up in order to take advantage of the United States.
Including Ireland? Is Ireland taking advantage of the US?
Of course they are. I can't, I have great respect for Ireland and what they did. And they should have done just what they did. But the United States shouldn't have let it happen. We had stupid leaders. We had leaders that didn't have a clue. So whatever they charge us, we're charging them. Nobody can complain about that. Whatever it is, it doesn't even matter what it is. If they charge us 25 or 20% or 10% or 2% or 200%, then that's what we're charging them. And so I don't know why people get upset about that, because there's nothing more fair than that.
Trump came out swinging on Truth Social this morning, writing, "The European Union, one of the most hostile and abusive taxing and tariffing authorities in the world, which was formed for the sole purpose of taking advantage of the United States, has just put a nasty 50% tariff on whiskey. If this tariff is not removed immediately, the U.S. will shortly place a 200% tariff on all wines, champagnes, and alcoholic products coming out of France and other EU-represented countries. This will be great for the wine and champagne businesses in the U.S." Now here's what the Canada and EU tariff situation looks like. Canada is placing 25% reciprocal tariffs on steel. They will also raise taxes on products like tools, computers, servers, and sports equipment. The European Union, meanwhile, is trying to target red states. They're raising tariffs on beef, poultry, peanut butter, bourbon, jeans, and motorcycles. Blue states like Illinois, the top soybean producer, will also feel these effects.
Mark Carney, Canada's incoming prime minister, said he'll meet with Trump if he takes a more comprehensive approach to trade and respects Canada's sovereignty. Carney said this week, "We firmly believe that in a world fraught with geopolitical and economic uncertainties, it is not in our common interest to burden our economies with tariffs."
The markets appear to have been chaotic lately as a result of the tariffs. According to Investors Business Daily, cooler than expected inflation data may help offset extreme dips in stock indexes.
Former Congressman Joe Walsh wrote on X, "At the rate he's going, tomorrow he'll announce a 1,000% tariff on everything from every country in the world. MAGA, MAGA."
Economics newsletter writer Joey Politano wrote, "Every day I wake up and there's more tariffs." That is a true observation. Look, I mean, Trump is right that the aggressive tariffing practices of European countries are very bad, but this is the opposite of what we want to do. We don't want to get into this tariffs arms race with Canada, the European Union. I don't want any tariffs. I don't want them to put tariffs on us. So Trump should use his expert negotiating tactics to get those tariffs taken down, and we should not place tariffs on them because no one wants this. We had Rand Paul on yesterday, Senator Rand Paul, and I asked him about the tariffs, which he's opposed to, and he said something so perceptive. He said when he's back in his home state of Kentucky, no one comes up to him, no one, not a person comes up and says, "I really think tariffs are a great idea. I want to see more tariffs." They come up to him and say, "We work in the home building industry and higher prices of steel are going to hurt us. We're bourbon distillers, higher prices are going to hurt us. We're whatever it is, in business, small businesses, large businesses, workers, consumers, everyone says, my number one concern is the prices of things being too expensive." And to Trump's point that this can help, the domestic, whatever, winemaking or alcohol making industry, okay, but you can't look at it just specific firms. It's true that a specific firm can be benefited by punitive economic harms being levied on its competitors, but it's an interconnected economy. What if you run a catering business that buys liquor from France or wherever, and now that that's going to be more expensive, your business is more expensive, so then the services are more expensive. So everything you do affects everyone else. Yes, it's true that specific firms can benefit from having damaging policies done to their rivals, but that's not the system I want to live in, where the government decides which businesses are worthy of succeeding and acts to punish the rest. Let the market decide that and let prices be lower for everyone. So European Union shouldn't do tariffs either, and we should strategize with them. And maybe you can narrowly defend it in that, well, if they're going to do it, we're going to do it, and that's how we get them to stand down. If it's about everybody standing down, fine, yes, but let's make that happen.
Robby, my head is still spinning from the fact that Donald Trump said what he said about Ireland while the Taoiseach of Ireland was visiting the White House, which is usually a very jovial, friendly, upbeat affair ahead of St. Patrick's Day. So that in itself is interesting. Yeah. But setting that aside, it actually proves a point, which is that Donald Trump is fundamentally misunderstanding how you're supposed to treat your allies versus your adversaries. And the whole point of having what was formerly touted as a pretty big achievement by the first Trump administration, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, is that there should essentially be pretty free-flowing trade between us and our two closest allies. So what we're seeing play out here is just counter to his own interests. And I think the reason you're seeing this reaction, why you heard what you heard from Senator Paul, is that consumers aren't buying it. Donald Trump is used to being able to tell a story in a certain way and expecting people to believe it. But I think consumers really do get that tariffs are a tax on them, and they don't like it. And the latest polling shows that. CNN's polling, Reuters Ipsos, they show that these tariffs are not popular by consumers.
Yeah, this is the unpopular part of the Trump agenda. I think so much of what Trump wants to do is popular, and this part will damage all of it. I think it is the greatest gift to the Democratic Party that has no idea how to proceed in crafting a message or having a messenger that can compete with the energy on the right. One thing that will tremendously help their fortunes is Republicans mismanaging the economy by making everything more expensive. It's not a good idea at all. I did want to pick up on what you said about our adversaries and our allies. I get your point. However, the conservative view and what Trump has come to power on is the view that our allies have taken advantage of us. We've been good to them. They have not been good to us. We've been responsible for policing the world. We, despite being an ocean away, have contributed not exactly as much, but a significant amount of money, for instance, to the defense of Ukraine. And it's Europe's backyard. Why aren't they primarily responsible for it? We have protected them in all sorts of other ways, and then they're going to have tariffs on us. That's not the way, like, they have not treated us as allies. So I want to have everyone stand down, have free market trade, which is the best thing for lifting people out of poverty, lowering prices for everyone, having good, fair competition between our industries and their industries. We can do manufacturing here if it's economically viable to do it here. If it's not economically viable to do it, we'll do it in partner countries that want to trade with us. That's all good, but it has to be mutual, and that's what Trump should be working to make it mutual. So I hope that what Canada and what Europe and Mexico take away from this is that we don't want tariffs, but we will do unto you as you do unto others. The simplest moral lesson. So everyone stand down, because we don't want to pay more for steel, more for wine. I don't pay more for wine. That's a real threat to Robby's lifestyle, Linda.
It's very clear where your priorities are, and I hope people can appreciate that. Look, I do want to go back to this point you made about Ukraine, though, and the portion that the United States pays into any sort of effort that's happening around the world. It isn't as if the nation hasn't benefited from it. The reason why president after president on both the left and the right has been great about having U.S. contributions all around the world is because we gain from it. We gain from it in terms of having the loudest microphone in the room. We gain from it by always being at the table and having influence in all of the other things that are happening around the world. And in the case of Ukraine, they are literally the front lines of democracy and our way of life. That is why you've seen both Democratic members and Republican members in the past. I can't say so much about what we're seeing right now, but in the past, that's why they've been so effusively supportive.
The front lines of democracy. The problem we have with that is we don't know that the country is behaving in a particularly democratic way. Maybe they're behaving in a more democratic way than Russia, the country invading them, and I'm sympathetic to their plight, and I am utterly opposed to what has happened to Ukraine, but haven't had an election, have suspended opposition parties, have suspended opposition media, is a country rife with corruption. That was the concern about them joining NATO in the first place, right? That they don't meet the criteria because they are not, they have not sufficiently evolved as a democratic nation. So is it really fair to say this is the front lines of democracy being fought over?
I think so, because what we do know is that Vladimir Putin is the enemy of democracy. He does not like our way of living. He does not like seeing democracy around the world. And he is attacking Ukraine as the first step to get to the rest of the world.
All right, we'll have more Rising right after this. What happened to the release of the JFK assassination files? President Trump signed an executive order in January to release the John F. Kennedy assassination files 2 months ago, and since then, crickets. Tucker Carlson sat down with News Nation's Chris Cuomo and posed the same question. Let's watch.
Why don't they put it out? Because institutions protect themselves, Tucker, as we both know.
Really?
And there is clearly information in those files that are going to make the CIA look bad.
Just the CIA?
Well, whatever. Different agencies.
No, not whatever. I mean,
well, I don't know because I haven't seen it.
Okay, well, so here's...
But it could be the FBI, it could be the CIA.
Okay, so I've always thought that. And then in January, there was a scramble over who's going to get what jobs in the new administration. And at one point, there was someone who was being discussed for a job in the intel world, and a member of the SSCI, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, Senate Intel Committee, went to the people making the decision and said, you cannot hire this person because this person will be certain to push for the release of the JFK files. So this is in 2025, less than 2 months ago, and you have a sitting member of the United States Senate whose main goal is to keep those files secret.
Chris Cuomo then added what he thinks is happening behind closed doors. Let's watch.
So Mike Pompeo gets in there. He's in charge of the CIA. Trump says, I'm releasing the files.
Right.
Okay? Somebody says something to Mike Pompeo that he then goes to the president of the United States and says, you can't release these things. And Trump acknowledges it. Now, do I believe that Trump did it under threat? No. I think that Trump just decided that whatever he was being told made sense.
But it's, and I'm not even speaking of Trump or Pompeo, who's a very sinister person. And you're absolutely right. Pompeo was the driver behind that. But who was driving Pompeo?
Cuomo asked Tucker to expose this Senate Select Committee member he was referring to earlier in the conversation.
So why don't you expose that person, first of all, so we can start chasing
Tom
after him
Cotton
or her?
of Arkansas did that.
Tom Cotton?
Yes, correct.
And did you ask him?
I haven't. No, I haven't asked him.
What the hell's
I'd
going
like
on
to.
with you?
I'd like to. And
kind of makes people suspicious of you, by the way.
Go
because
ahead,
if you
dude.
know
Go
that
ahead.
if you know that Tom Cotton said you can't pick this person
That is
because
correct.
And then you didn't go to him and find out why?
Well, I need to sit down with him. I'm not sure that he'll do an interview with me.
With you?
I'm waiting.
You are like the spirit animal of that administration.
No.
Senator Tom Cotton responded on Fox News to Tucker's allegations. Let's watch.
It's false. I have no
Completely
problem.
false.
Completely
Nothing to
false.
it.
I have no problem releasing the JFK files. Tucker could have called or texted me. He has texted me multiple times in recent weeks and asked me, and I would have told him that. I've never spoken to President Trump or any of his associates or administration officials about the JFK files. I've never objected to someone taking office because of their position on the JFK files. I have to say I have complete faith in Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, John Ratcliffe, and Tulsi Gabbard to carry out President Trump's directive on the JFK files. I'm a little surprised that Tucker Carlson apparently doesn't have faith in those four people, all of whom I think he knows and personally respects, that they're going to carry out President Trump's directive.
Spicy.
Intrigue. What do you make of all of
very
this?
Spicy. Tucker loves to cause
Stirring that pot.
trouble. Yeah, I guess I don't know who's right and who's wrong here, because that's a pretty direct accusation that Tom Cotton says is not the case. But, it speaks to the larger issue of we are always promised massive disclosure of these more sensational subjects, the JFK files, the Epstein files, UAPs, that's the unidentified flying objects that whistleblowers told this channel, told News Nation, our sister channel, about really explosive things that there were bodies of aliens that had been recovered by the government being held in some kind of warehouse. And we want to know. We just want disclosure and accountability to find out if any of these things are true. Obviously, there is good reason to think that maybe we don't know everything about the JFK situation, although now it's 60 years ago or something. A whole generation of Americans were not satisfied with the government's answers on this topic. And it's also been the case with Epstein. And you just had the other week a promised disclosure, and then Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, hands binders full of the same information we already have to a bunch of influencers, and MAGA world is not buying it. So the broader point here is, if you're going to make big claims about disclosure coming, that we have taken over now, and now we're finally going to give you the people you've been looking for all this time, you've been waiting for, that we promised you we were going to get you, then they come up with nothing. It's very unsatisfying to the MAGA base. Deservedly unsatisfying.
It's pretty weird, right? I mean, I think the thing that's most interesting is that we've seen this show play before during the last administration. So what is it exactly? I mean, I can totally understand now why there are college courses around the conspiracies and whatnot here.
Well, not every conspiracy, not every conspiracy theory is correct. Obviously, a lot of conspiracies are just conspiracy theories.
Sure.
But sometimes, however, 1 in 10 crazy things that, like, I would have never believed that, ends up being true. Like, the lab leak theory of COVID's origins is a good example. Now, that has not been proven necessarily, but it was initially branded a racist conspiracy theory.
Right.
In fact, Tom Cotton was one of the people who was accused of spreading a racist conspiracy theory by, I think it was the Washington Post or some mainstream outlet, saying that he's talking about that idea and here's why that idea is a conspiracy theory. And now that, we're still debating it, but the Energy Department and the FBI have concluded that's the more likely explanation for COVID's origins. If you had described the Epstein situation to someone who'd never heard anything about it, who said, yeah, there was this incredibly wealthy person who had an island, and he would fly for high-level political leaders in both parties, and like Bill Gates, and had financial ties to Bank of America, and he would have sex with underage women, and he would rope other people into doing that, and maybe he'd film them, and he'd use it for blackmail, and
you think it was
possibly
Hollywood.
He's an intelligence official. There's accusations he was Israeli intelligence or American intelligence or something. Like that also, and then he will die under mysterious circumstances in prison. You'd say, right, that sounds like Hollywood. that all happened. So some crazy things are, just because it's crazy doesn't mean it's not true.
That's true, but where do we go from here, Robby?
Well, we should go here into greater disclosure, or just be honest with the MAGA base. If there's nothing more to say on these subjects, say, actually, you already know everything about the JFK assassination. He was killed by Lee Harvey Oswald from the book depository, and then Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey Oswald because he was really mad that he killed Kennedy. And Lee Harvey Oswald did it because he had like vague communist ties and was probably a crazy person. And it seems all really sus, but that's actually it. Just say that. And don't say, oh yeah, we're going to knock your socks off with this stuff you haven't seen yet, and then just give us the same stuff. That is what people are getting sick of. That's what they're feeling gaslit over. I felt that way about the alien stuff, which we've talked about exhaustively on Rising, with all these whistleblowers saying, oh yeah, it's, wait till you see this latest round of stuff coming out, and then there's nothing.
And then there's nothing.
If there's a warehouse, there's a building with alien crafts or bodies in it, I want to know where it is, and I will lead a mob, and we will go attack it. We will do that, and we will do it peacefully. We will march peacefully.
Maybe wrote Will Smith into it.
Maybe Will Smith. Welcome to Earth, kind of jab to the. I got that reference. So that's what we'll do. But we need to know the truth. No more excuses. Next up, is the 2028 presidential race getting crowded already? We'll find out. Well, we just got through a presidential election a few months ago, but some Democrats are already sending strong signals that they are throwing their hats into the ring.
Per Politico, former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, my former boss, is expected to announce that he's not running for Michigan's open Senate seat. Democratic operative David Axelrod told Politico Pete would have been a formidable candidate for the Senate had he chosen to run. But had he won in 26, it would almost certainly have taken him out of the conversation for 28. This certainly keeps that option open.
Politico also ran a column about someone else who might very well be a contender in 2028, Rahm Emanuel, the former Chicago mayor and former Obama chief of staff, and most recently was the United States ambassador to Japan. Emanuel told Politico, I've only been back from Japan 2 months. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not done with public service, and I'm hoping public service is not done with me.
Emanuel also dished some presidential talk during a meeting with the Economic Club of Chicago. Here he is.
We have failed the American people, and they're pissed off. And guess what? They earn the right to be pissed off at all of us. I'm going to say this right now. We're having a debate about pronouns, right? Well, what if you have 2/3 of your kids that don't know what a pronoun is? Okay, and nobody is raising their voices. You just had the worst reading scores in 30 years, worst math scores in 30 years. And we're talking about bathrooms, locker rooms. Well, you can't be a party that believes in equity and allow 2/3 of your kids can't read. 2/3 of your kids. I believe I grew up in a home, a Democrat was one of the 10 lost tribes of the Jewish people.
Some are not happy at this prospect, however. Political commentator Matt Stoller wrote on X, Rahm Emanuel is running in 2028. If he's the candidate, I'm leaving the party. I'm not interested in a boring club membership.
Then you have California Governor Gavin Newsom. It's been a big topic on Rising today. Newsom recently launched a podcast inviting right-wing powerhouses like Charlie Kirk, Steve Bannon, and Michael Savage on as guests. As Politico points out, it seems that Newsom's intentions are clear. Lulu Chang-Maservi, founder of communications company Rostra, wrote on X, the biggest comms coup of the week is Gavin Newsom's podcast. I was dismissive at first, but it's actually political genius. Newsom has not only invited them on, but he's kept the conversation civil and even warm and will gradually distance himself from the woke excesses of the past. Now he'll have several years to hone his argument, practice debating, and explain away political liabilities like his COVID school closures. All the leftist headlines attacking him show it's working. He's, quote, out of step with the state. He's all set in the state. He's aiming for Washington. Yeah, she's saying basically what I was saying earlier today about the success of this strategy. We've talked about that a good deal. When it comes to Rahm Emanuel, look, I think he was discovering the right message there, but he's very associated with Obama, and I guess maybe that's fine. And I don't know that Matt Stoller's fury or frustration matters very much, but it remains to be seen whether he can be, electoral combatant in his own right. I do agree that emphasizing how being hung up on progressive things like what pronouns to use and missing the massive failures of our education system to produce young people who have improving math and reading scores is a area for Democrats to focus on and to emphasize how they are going to innovate and going to abandon whatever failed policies of the past led those scores not to improve in municipalities run by Democrats. So I think that is the right message. I don't know whether Rahm Emanuel is the right person to deliver it. Maybe Gavin Newsom is if he's going to get on those subjects. But what do you make of it?
I'm smiling because Rahm Emanuel is known for being combative. Mm-hmm. And so if what Democrats are looking for is somebody who's ready for a fight, I mean, Rahm Emanuel may be the answer to that particular question. I will say he has been, in my estimation, pretty consistent about what he thinks the message of the party should be. He was very direct in pushing back on this James Carville notion of rolling over and not doing anything. And he's been like beating a dead horse and saying that Democrats need to be talking about only one thing, and that is the price of groceries, the price of groceries, the price of groceries. And I think it makes sense that he was talking to the economic club there. I think what's really interesting is of the three people that we have highlighted here, they're all known for being straight shooters in the way they talk. And whether you like their policies or not, they come across as exactly who they are, which I think might be just the right prescription for the Democratic Party in 2028.
And they're culturally moderate, or at least they're
sure
moving in a cultural moderate direction. Newsom's big liability, in my opinion, is the COVID policies, which are just so unpopular on the right. He doesn't seem like, I don't know if there are liberals in California who are really happy with how he performed during COVID. Maybe there are. It seems like he risks just alienating what was his base as he pursues a more centrist or moderate path. And then also there's the issue of what is I think moderating on culture issues is smart for Democrats, but then if they just moderate on everything, then they're going to just end up in some kind of squishy centrist place where they don't inspire any fervor or love or excitement among the activists they need to send in small donations or whatever. Those people want probably economic progressivism at least, and so I don't know if they're going to moderate on culture issues but remain left on those things. I think they're still working that out.
Well, I
That's
think
kind of the Bernie Sanders approach, honestly.
Maybe, but I don't think any of those three gentlemen would argue that they're trying to be Bernie Sanders. I think the key to, and this is good advice for Democrats, pro tip, not just for Democrats, but also for Republicans, the key is you have to be yourself. And I think that is why people find all three of those individuals compelling. Again, you might disagree with their policies. You might think that their answers to the challenges that we face as a nation are not the right ones. But no one has ever said that Pete Buttigieg doesn't come across as the normal guy when he's talking to you about complicated issues. No one thinks Rahm Emanuel is trying to be somebody he's not. And Gavin Newsom has always said exactly what's on his mind.
Coming up next, how could a remake of a classic go so wrong? Can you say wokeness? We'll talk about it coming up next. The premiere of Snow White is coming up this week, but Variety is reporting that Disney is doing something a little different. They're actually banning outside media.
Disney will limit the coverage to photographers and other in-house people, per Variety. While Disney didn't specify why this was, the storm around the movie might be a hint.
For instance, here's a video of Rachel Ziegler, who plays Snow White, and Gal Gadot, who plays the evil queen, that caused backlash from some fans.
We absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true.
Then, after the presidential election last year, Ziegler wrote in an Instagram story, "There's a deep sickness in this country shown in the sheer amount of people who showed up for this man who threatens our democracy. May Trump supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself never know peace." Naturally, many on the right bashed her for those comments, including Megyn Kelly, who called her a pig. Ziegler did apologize after making that statement.
Ziegler has also been vocal about her support for the Palestinians. Gadot, on the other hand, gave a speech this month at the Anti-Defamation League's annual summit. Here she is.
Never did I imagine that we would witness such a day of such death and destruction of Jews in our lifetime. And never did I imagine that on the streets of the United States and different cities around the world, we would see people not condemning Hamas, but celebrating, justifying, and cheering on a massacre of Jews.
Then you have the dwarves issue. Game of Thrones actor Peter Dinklage, who has dwarfism, ripped Disney for using dwarves in their movies because he said it wasn't progressive. Now, then Disney replaced them with CGI dwarves, which made other dwarf actors actually mad since Disney was essentially replacing them. That's good work for you if you're a dwarf actor, would be to land in a Snow White production. And yeah, I thought that was a really unfair thing for Peter Dinklage to do. To say
I was judging you for messing up his name. He's our guy.
Well, I like Peter Dinklage, but saying that, you know, he obviously got famous for playing a dwarf character on Game of Thrones. So to say that, you know, it's wrong or like demeaning or whatever to cast dwarves in dwarf roles, well, what are you supposed to? I mean, that's good work for people who are dwarf actors, and that's how they felt. So anyway, that's a little bit aside from the main issue, which is that Rachel Ziegler is not very popular with conservatives because she has a lot of contempt for them. She's expressed sentiments of contempt for them. She's actually seemed to express contempt for the entire Snow White project. It is a beloved fantasy story of a beautiful princess being rescued by a prince. If we're going to do, you know, revisionist feminism. What's that?
Which I'm going to judge.
Yeah. Revisionist feminism for everything, it just alienates some people. Now, Gal Gadot is disliked by the left for being a supporter of Israel, and I believe she served briefly in the IDF.
She did, yeah.
So she is known to be a supporter of IDF. I think she's
But that's
awesome.
Their conscription policy, of
Right.
course. Everybody's.
I love Gal Gadot. I think she's a great actress.
She's Wonder Woman. She'll always be Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman 2 was terrible, but Wonder Woman 1 was very good, and I've liked her in some other things. She was great in Death on the Nile, which is one of my favorite Hercule Poirot stories.
I've not seen that.
It was really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the criticism and controversy that we've seen has been around the reimagining of a story that doesn't meet today's standards of feminism. I think that's kind of a reasonable place to be honest. Far be it from me to tell Disney how to make stories interesting and how to inspire little girls. I don't really get to that particular set of critiques.
Oh, far be it from me. No, I'm going to tell them exactly what they should do. I'm happy to order them around all the time. You know, I've complained. I think you were here when I was discussing how they've ruined the Star Wars universe. You can do alternate revisionist tales or whatever, and just if you have like an original idea and pull it off, it's fine.
I mean, look at Wicked.
Snow White has been done. Oh, I'll get to that in a minute. Snow White has been done numerous times, and the version with Kirsten Stewart. Did you see that one? The Huntsman.
Yes.
Yeah, those were
Stewart, yes.
Those were fun. You know, they made her into a kind of warrior woman.
Right.
And actually, the evil queen there is played by Charlize Theron.
And Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, Chris Hemsworth. And it was a pretty good movie. Yeah. And she has like really cool evil powers. I like her visual style. She like shoots swords,
Milk
shrapnel.
Stuff.
Yeah, it just had cool visuals. So you can do it. It's fine. It's just like, but also, what people like about the story is the nostalgia and the sweetness of there's nothing wrong with beautiful maidens being rescued by traditionally masculine heroes. Like it's not everything has to be redone and made
It doesn't, but I do think
and that's the criticism of Disney now, that they're making everything woke and feminist and as South Park, I can't repeat the things South Park said about the criticism of Disney, but it's very accurate.
If you have nostalgia, you can always go back and watch the original version. I think the thing about art is that it is meant to be recreated, redesigned, reimagined, and done in different ways over and over and over again. I think we should be applauding that as opposed to criticizing it.
But then just make a new story. Just come up with a new story. It doesn't have to be Snow White. Just make a new story where you have kick-ass female protagonist or whatever. There's a little bit of just redoing, revising already existing properties. Like, come on, people, have an original idea. Sometimes I worry that there's not going to be enough original ideas in production anymore because, like, they're about to redo Harry Potter, even though the movies all came out within our lifetime. Like,
I did not know this. They're all adults now.
They're redoing the Harry Potter stuff, and it's like, okay, the books are great, the movies are great, they're not that old. We're going to draw on this well again already?
Maybe they will reimagine Harry Potter, and it will open our eyes to something else.
I don't want them to do that.
My view of the world,
come up with
optimism.
a new story. Do something new. Also, you could still set it in the Harry Potter universe and tell like a different story that takes place before or after or involves different characters. Why does it have to be the same thing redone when we liked it just fine the first time?
This might be the next stage of your career, Robby. You could go
I got a lot of ideas.
Rewrite and revise all of these different stories.
I mean, if I could magically make any one person on Earth appear here for an interview, it would be J.K. Rowling, so that I could talk to her about my ideas for Harry Potter sequels. But I just get so sick of the same thing.
Is that an official invitation? You look at the camera.
She's welcome to come on the show. Yes, I'm sending that out into the ecosystem. So I don't know. I think I reserve judgment until I would see it. Although I'm not really inclined to see this movie. I'm not. The Snow White is a little bit boring.
It might not be my favorite of all the many Disney stories that inspired me as a young girl. I do take issue with you saying they never do the other new stories. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Frozen and Frozen 2 came out and was kind of revolutionary for being entirely about women protagonists. And yes, Encanto, you had Mulan. I mean, these are all very interesting.
I didn't see Moana 2. I liked Moana.
Moana 1 is amazing.
Moana was good.
Yeah, Moana 2 is, I think it's hard to top the original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do your kids like them?
Of course, yes. My children are obsessed.
Big Disney fans?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, that does it for us today on Rising. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can find podcasts. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you later.